Great to see so many returning folks to our call this week. We've got an outstanding guest and topic, which we'll get to in just a moment. If you're new to I4CP's Next Practices Weekly, we are the Institute for Corporate Productivity. We're a human capital research firm. We discover the people practices that drive high performance in your organization. We do that primarily through our research studies, where we look at high performance through a business lens, meaning revenue growth, market share, profitability, and customer satisfaction. And we like to tease out those human capital HR practices that high-performing companies, judged by those 4 criteria, are doing far more often than their low-performing brethren. We study all areas of HR. We come out with 4 major studies a year, a priorities and predictions piece in January, but we do a lot of other medium-sized studies, pulse surveys, and more. We are a member-based organization. You see here just a small sampling of the logos representative of the several hundred organizations that are in I4CP membership. You see it spans from very large organizations like 3M, Microsoft, Amazon, Nike, Visa. My eyes are just darting around the logos here. They also span across different market verticals, different industries, from healthcare, financial services, high tech, manufacturing, retail, you name it. We've got a growing cohort of unicorn startup organizations, regional health and banking companies. If you're with a member organization and with us today, a special welcome to you. Great to have you with us for the call. If you're not with a member organization but would like to learn more about what that entails, just reach out to anyone at I4CP or visit our website at i4cp.com, and we'll be happy to get you that information. My name is Tom Stone. I'm a senior research analyst at I4CP, and I have the pleasure most weeks of co-hosting these Next Practice Weekly calls. This week, my co-host is my colleague, Justin Natali, membership director here at I4CP. Good morning, Justin.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, good to have you with us. You're going to be leading the conversation with our special guest, who we'll introduce in just a moment. But I have a few other quick announcements and reminders to get through first. As the name implies, this is Next Practices Weekly. So other than holiday weeks, we do meet every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. You see the upcoming calls. We've got August 1st, August 8th, August 15th. We're going to have guests from Zachary Construction Corp., from Savers, and then my own colleague, Molly Lombardi. I'll be interviewing her on our recent upskilling frontline workers study coming up on August 15th. As I noted, we do several major studies every year. Our most recent one, where the report came out in May, is called the Team Network Effect. So a couple things to note on this study. One, there's an executive brief that's available to everyone. We make that publicly available. The full report, of course, is reserved for members only, and Zeta is putting the links to those over in the chat. You can download the appropriate item. We've also recently had Rob Cross and Catherine Brecken, 2 of my colleagues here at I4CP, that led on this study, 2 researchers, and they presented some of the key findings. That is available as a recording. The slides are available up in the archive for Next Practices Weekly, as are pretty much all sessions that we do in this call series. So for that particular event on the Team Network Effect, I'd encourage you to watch the recording, download the slides if you missed it a few weeks ago, and then you could scroll through the archive of past events as well. We've got a couple hundred now because we've been doing this call series under a few different names dating back to the beginning of the pandemic. Also wanted to note, registration is now open for the I4CP Next Practices Now conference, which is held every year in March in Scottsdale, Arizona at the lovely Fairmont Princess Hotel. This year it'll be in early March, which hopefully will interfere a bit less with school break and spring break and so on for folks with kids. March 3rd through the 6th are the dates. You can see if you register early, you'll save $300. There's a QR code there and a link. Zeta will be putting this information over in the chat as well. We're working on the speaker lineup. Every year we've got a great mix of HR leaders. Last year we had several CEOs and former CEOs of major companies. We get thought leaders, book authors, you name it. It's exclusively focused on HR best and next practices. And there are no vendors at this conference. This isn't a conference where there's a big expo hall with vendors lurking around trying to sell you things. So it's really a unique experience for HR professionals. With that, I'm going to turn things over now to Justin, who's going to facilitate the conversation and introduce our special guest.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I'm really excited to have Jen on today from Symetra, a company that we're well familiar with here in the Pacific Northwest, but maybe not all of you know quite as well. And have her talk about how they're future-proofing their work, which is it's a pretty bold statement. But as you'll learn here over the next hour, they're doing some really impressive things. They're truly exemplifying next practices and what we mean when we say that. And so there should be lots of great ideas that you're going to learn from Jen today. But Jen, before we get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about Symetra and a little about yourself and your role and how you got to
Sure.
be the role you're in today.
Awesome. Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me today. It is a little bit overcast here in the Bellevue, Washington area. So I will tell you a little bit about Symetra, and then I'll kind of move into a little bit more about me. Um, Symetra, we are a financial services organization, because I oftentimes get asked, what's a Symetra? And it's really not what, it's who is a Symetra. So financial services, we've got about 2,700 awesome employees who really since 2021, well, since the pandemic, work primarily remotely across the US. Our parent company, interestingly enough, is an organization out of Japan, Sumitomo Life. They purchased us back in 2015, and we were publicly traded at the time, and now we are privately held by one single shareholder. So I have been at Symetra now for a fair amount of time, and I lead the talent acquisition and talent development teams here, and I use she, her pronouns. And Symetra's actually been around. I did the math yesterday. It's actually 67 years, so that 65 is a little bit outdated. But I actually believe we're one of the most innovative financial services organizations out there. Our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion remain very strong and unwavering. And we actually have the aspiration of being the most inclusive insurance carrier in the nation. We're actually a founding member, for those of you in the Northwest who know Climate Pledge. We're a first founding member of Climate Pledge Arena. And we are team partners with both the Seattle Kraken, which I know, Justin, you're a big Kraken fan, and with the Seattle Storm. Interestingly enough, too, our CEO, her name is Margaret Meister. She started working at Symetra. We were under another name back when she started, but she started working here when she was an intern in the actuarial program, and she moved up in different positions throughout our organization to CFO. So she was CFO when I started here, and then I think it's been probably about 6 years now, Margaret moved into the CEO position. So I think we're kind of unique in that financial services in the Northwest, not tech, kind of surrounded by tech, and we have a female CEO who, you look across financial services, and that is not as common as you would think. So we think we're pretty special and pretty unique, and kind of excited to talk more about what we're doing over here.
Thanks, Jen. I love that. I briefly debated putting on my Seattle Kraken background that I use in our internal meetings, but so you started on this journey a few years ago and started right off talking about future-proofing your work, which we're talking a lot about that in the future of work these days, but a couple of years ago, maybe not as much. So give us a little bit of background on how that idea came to be and what was the problem you were trying to solve for there at Symetra?
Yeah, great question, Justin. Thank you. So I think it really all started in kind of early 2019, which just sounds so long ago now, but so much has happened since then. So early 2019, we were asked to start really coming together and drafting kind of a unifying strategy for across the enterprise. So Margaret had come in, or I should say, had been promoted to CEO. And so this is one of kind of the first things that she tasked the leadership team with. And so while the business divisions had historically had goals and strategies, this was really the first time that we had done this across the enterprise. And so it's one where this would really be this uniting how we would achieve our various strategies, and really kind of that overarching vision of creating a world where more people have access to financial freedom. So it was a very exciting time. It was one that in hindsight, it was interesting to kind of finally see like the finished product, after all of the conversations and the work that had gone into it. So Tom, if we go to the next one there, kind of zoom in here on now one of the 6 pillars is, you can see there, Symetra empowers employees. And under that, we really at the time, so keep in mind, this is 2019, we never even, had ever heard of COVID, but we'd identified 3 specific areas of focus under that pillar. It was culture, employer of choice, and future-proofed workforce. In fact, let's see if I can find it. Oh, I think I did. At the time, this sticky note has actually been on my desk. It doesn't stick anymore, but I've had this sticky note since 2019 because I just always had it right in front of me, including when I worked from home. So we, there was no, at that point in time, there was no pandemic. There was no, sort of like radical disruption like that, except we did know we were going through a digital disruption, and that would really require our employees to develop new skills. Now, at the time, we really didn't necessarily know how we were going to do this. And I'll be really honest, at the time, it felt really bold and kind of uncomfortable to put out this roadmap without having it all figured out, because that's kind of not what we had ever done before. Usually we figure it out and then we cascade it. And it was sort of like the reverse, where we sort of put out, this is what we're going to do. And so now we really had to back up these aspirations with, okay, now in real life, now what are we going to do? So if we go to the next slide, and Tom, this is one, if you just hold right there for a second, it kind of builds. Oh, that's okay. That's fine. Thank you. So I'm going to talk for a second, kind of internally, and then kind of go back out to the more of an external view. So what was also happening at that time is we had already established a really well thought out career framework. And that work had been done a couple of years prior, and it was really a game changer for us. We finally had organization around all of our roles. There was transparency for employees about career paths. They could see in like a job family what that progression would look like for them. But what we are starting to see happen is we have a lot of, in fact, I think today we have about 700 people who are in roles that we refer to as supporting contributor roles. So those are roles like customer service, sales support specialists, claims examiners, like associate underwriters, those kinds of roles. What we were seeing though is, and this was just my visual for it of how it kind of was feeling, is a lot of times the SCs were having a really hard time bridging kind of this canyon over to the more individual, so think like analyst roles, or what we now have today, technical contributor roles. And a lot of times, they would get interviewed by the hiring managers internally, but hiring managers often opted to go with an external candidate, from a competitor who had more of that exact experience. And so I was like, we really have to, if we really believe that we want to create this culture of internal mobility and a way for employees to see a path forward at Symetra and not having to leave to go get that next step, we have to do a better job to help them bridge even this perceived sort of, canyon or chasm between where they are and where they want to be. So I just really felt like experience does not have to be a proxy for capability. These employees, they know our systems, they know our products, and our products are really complex. They know our customers, they know our partners. And so it just was feeling like we had this kind of lost opportunity to tap into that. And so how do we help them get there? So then if you shift, so Tom, go ahead and click one more time. This builds a little bit. So kind of going back to like Symetra empowers and how we're going to future-proof our workforce. I did a lot of research, and one of the things that I really kind of resonated with me was this idea that becoming a skills-based organization. So, you kind of had started to see this shift away from, kind of the traditional job, if you will. And there's 2 authors, Robin Jesuthason and Dr. John Boudreau, who wrote Work Without Jobs. And I thought that book in particular kind of encapsulated and actually sort of helped me see what the future could look like. And it sort of was like, that's okay, that's what it is going to look like. And we were starting to see a little bit of that in like our IT areas, where you have people who come together to work on a project or initiative and then go back to, the next thing, rather than it being a really static organizational framework. Well, I report to Justin, who reports to Tom, and I only do work in this. So it was really becoming apparent. And I think these two authors did a great job. I highly, really recommend this as a resource when you're starting to think about what this looks like going forward. And then if you would click one more time there, Tom, there you go. Then the other thing that came on the scene here is, Tom, you were mentioning about the big bodies of research that you guys publish each year. And I will say this was a game changer. The Accelerating Total Workforce Readiness, I feel like just really, it brought it all together for us to say, this is an amazing blueprint, may not follow it exactly, but an amazing blueprint for organizations to consider as they're trying to get their workforce ready for whatever might be around the corner. One of the points in that particular study that was interesting to me, and it actually kind of scary, is I have to read this. It's the survey. You guys ran a survey, indicated that only 30% of survey participants said that they believe their organization has the skills and capabilities needed to execute on the strategy for the next 1 to 3 years. So that's a little frightening. And I think that was a study done back in 2021, if I'm or maybe it was late 2020.
Yeah.
So
No, I can chime in on that and say, yes,
yeah.
that you've got it right. And yeah, that was the sort of headline number that we then supported with a lot of other data points as to why the perception was that it was so low, only 30%. I was actually the lead researcher on that study, and we created several useful tools and guidebooks on that as well. And I know Zeta's put the link to that for members on the call today over in the chat. And I just wanted to note, we're going to be doing another study very similar to this one, but with the angle now of AI and the impact that that's having on workforce readiness as well. So that's going to be our next major study, and we're crafting that survey right now, actually.
Excellent.
And actually, even though that was 2021, I would say in my role as a membership director, this is the study I have talked the most about this year, because now we're finally to where, unlike you're a bit of an outlier with Symetra and this work, but most organizations are just now getting to the point where they can do these things. The data was there, the study was like, yes, that's right, but they just are now catching up with the ability to be able to implement some of these things. So I've been talking about this more than any other study this year, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's a good point, Justin, too. It doesn't happen overnight, right? This is, if you go to the next slide, this was really I'm going to be really clear. We did not in the beginning have a fancy logo like this at all. All of this work came from very humble beginnings. It wasn't until much later in the work that we actually, got ourselves a really fancy logo to go with the work. So if you go to the next slide and click one more time, I think it fills in there with so this image is really what we've used to really socialize and talk about what kind of what came under that moniker of Future of Work for Symetra. And back, I think initially we were calling kind of this body of work, we called it, I think it was workforce capabilities is what we came up with, and used that for a while. And the turning point, because I think we were a lot of us were doing this, but, I kind of say off the side of our desks. It was something that it wasn't necessarily part of my, job description and my full-time role, certainly not. But this team, and we kind of started pulling people in from different areas who you would was kind of hearing about what we were doing, and in 2022 the future of work became an actual enterprise priority for Symetra. So we were you can't see it, it's on my bulletin board, but every year we have agreed upon enterprise priorities that are really the North Star for our organization under like the Symetra Empowers. And so we formalized this into a broad team, and then had work streams under each of these with the circles. So starting like with skills and capabilities framework, we knew we needed to have I'll say framework, a way to help leaders start to anticipate, identify what might the skills of the future for their roles that they lead, what will that look like? Now, I can't go in and sit down and do a consult with a leader and say, oh, you're going to need this, this, and this. I don't know. I don't, they know their role, they know the roles, they know the customers, the systems. So what we did is we created, or my team created, a playbook that we started off with some scenario based. So it's sort of like your entry point might be technology, a new piece of technology has come into your ecosystem, and now your employees have to learn how to, operate on Salesforce. So what do you do? So we had several different scenarios that leaders can use depending on what the situation is, and then a series of discovery questions to help them kind of like peel back and start to anticipate what that could look like. So that was a big body of work in and of itself there. And then we discovered we really needed to do some internal upskilling. We certainly rely on a lot of external vendors to help us with a lot of the technical training, but there were several roles that we found. Specifically, the first one I think was business analysis, and how to do that at Symetra. And so we stood up basically like a 8 to 12 week academy, and I was actually kind of shocked that they let us have their people 50% of the time, but the selected, they're almost like an apprentice, and they spent dedicated time with mentors, doing some formal training, but also doing job shadowing with, really experienced business analysts to be able to bring their skills up. So we've kind of replicated that a couple of times. It does take a lot of internal capacity and commitment to doing that, but that was we saw some really great quick returns on that investment. That in turn informed, now what other things do we need to bring into our learning ecosystem to be able to give people the tools that they need to learn and continue to kind of grow, really nurture that growth mindset. And then if you keep going, the talent check-in, when we got rid of performance management back in, I think it was 2016, we did away with the, annual performance review. And we went to more of a cycle of real-time feedback. And to support that, we do kind of quarterly, 3 to 4 times a year, something we call the Swift check-in. So as part of this work, we dedicate at least 1, sometimes 2, of that Swift check-in each year to something learning related. So we just finished, as a matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago, we did a skills check-in. And so that is kind of leads me then to in doing all of this, we knew at some point we were going to need to have some kind of technology enabler to support this. And so we were doing all of this work and looking outside to see what might exist. And there wasn't that big of a market. There were a couple of different products that were out there. And so that in and of itself was a big work stream as well. I'm sure my team that is watching today is all going, yes. So we'll get more into that. But I think, Tom, probably if we go to the next slide, there's a short video that gives a much more succinct than I did overview.
All right, so the moment of truth here, I did check the checkbox for sharing audio, and this did work earlier, so let's see if this works well.
Welcome to the future of work. I am so excited about what Symetra is doing to empower the future of work, and I'll share a few highlights today of where we're headed. The world around us is changing rapidly, and digitization, as well as the relentless changing expectations of customers, puts tremendous pressure on organizations like ours to transform quickly and to adapt to new technology and new ways of doing things. We are not immune, and so I'm excited about what Symetra is doing to empower the future of work. I'd like to share a few highlights of where we're headed. Follow me. I feel so much connection to Symetra Empowers employees. I love working for Symetra and the work that I get to do here, and I'm passionate about helping our employees find engaging, purpose-filled work that uses their natural skills and talents. Symetra is working hard to continue to modernize as an employer of choice. from embracing a remote first and hybrid work arrangements to embracing solutions that leverage cutting-edge technology like artificial intelligence that helps employees identify internal opportunities based on their skills that they have or skills they want to learn. We're building this modern culture of continuous learning and creating ways for learning to happen in the flow of work. The first phase of the new talent intelligence platform that is powered by artificial intelligence has launched. The platform helps match job seekers, both internal and external, to open positions at Symetra based on their skills. The second phase introduces new functionality for Symetra around personalized upskilling, curated learning based on what skills you want to develop and a supporting development plan, additional tools for career navigation, access to small projects internally, as well as finding a skills-based mentor. Whew, that is a lot, and I'll dive into these new capabilities more specifically in upcoming videos. Thanks, Tom. Good job on that. That's oftentimes the thing that you just go, oh,
Right.
sound's not on.
Yeah.
I'll
Great.
just note too that that video, we actually have had an ongoing series. And so one of our learning experience designers, Marie, actually upskilled herself in the tool of Beyond, because that was not a tool that we used at Symetra. And she's done just a fantastic job in bringing it. I think the characters and the way of doing it has been a really nice part of our change management or our change leadership approach.
Yeah, those videos are great. So we're going to talk more about some technology that included. But before we go further, I think I want to touch on, to me, what is one of the components of this that has really made it successful, which is this idea that of doing career personas. I think in a lot of times we can get really caught up on the overwhelm of doing skills inventories and career pathing because there's so many roles and how do we choose, and you took a different path with this and created personas instead. And so could you tell us a little bit about what that means and how you ended up there?
Yeah. Oh, Justin, that's a great question. So this was really, I think about I'm going to go back for a second to the overarching team that we assembled for Future of Work. Yes, heavily, populated with talent development folks, with other individuals in HR. But we really pulled in a lot of individuals from the business areas. And it kind of, I'll say it was kind of a motley crew, a little eclectic collection. And one of the individuals was really passionate about design thinking and really brought a lot of that. A lot of us kind of went, well, I've heard of it. I haven't really used it. What does that look like? And so they did a fabulous job of bringing in this idea of personas, but really built around kind of where people, meeting them where they are. It's one of those, like, I kind of identify, well, maybe it's because I think that was my avatar, but like Sabrina feeling stuck and disengaged. Like, you could have that at all levels. You could have that in a customer service frontline employee. You can have that in an executive who's like, I don't know what's coming next for me. And so by sort of casting these characters, we've found that it kind of unlocked a lot of the potential for how we might go about, looking at this. So I cannot take credit for these at all. This was really it took a village to come up with it. But what's been really cool is these personas have been sustained. Like, we continue to go back to them for various things and go, let's go look at those personas again. Like, is there, I feel like that might have been Samara, or was it Alex that was at the crossroads? And so, it's almost like they've become, Symetra employees.
I love that. And they have their own avatars. Tom, I think you had a couple of questions coming into the chat.
Yeah, if I could surface a couple of things from the chat before we move on here. Jose asked a question a few minutes ago about how did you get this overall approach to talent and everything? What was your approach for getting the CEO and the rest of the C-suite like involved or on board? Sometimes there's pushback from some folks there.
Yeah. Oh, Jose. It's a good question. I will say, I think the turning point for this was in 21, I might have my years mixed up here. Maybe it's 2020. Back when it was kind of workforce capabilities, it wasn't, as robust as you see now with future of work. And it was just that the ongoing socialization. It was an ongoing, I find, and I'm sure this is not any different at your organizations, our executives are really busy. And back then it was dealing with, pandemic and return to office and our employees safe. So there was a lot of distraction amongst all the other things, but it was kind of the continuous dripping and coming back around. Here's what we're doing, coming back around. At the time, this office, we have since dissolved it, but we had a office of the chief operations officer because we didn't have really a COO. It was a group of about 4 senior level executives. And so we kind of tapped into that office to be our executive sponsor. So when we put together our business case, and I think it was 2020, to become an enterprise priority. We didn't make it the first year, but it definitely garnered a lot of interest, which helped us the next year to be really in a great place because we had continued. Basically, they said to us, keep going. You're on the right track, keep going. And then the next year we were able to become an actual priority, which also equates to some funding.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
in these kind of situations, you kind of look around and nobody seems to have any funding for it.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned earlier, that this doesn't happen overnight. This is a multi-year journey, all the different components of it. And so even though it wasn't a priority that first year that you pitched it to the top level leaders, the fact that they said, keep going just without the added, boost to budget, say in tech and so on, that allowed you to keep going. And it's a multi-year journey, so you weren't really set back. The other question that I wanted to surface from the chat was from Nicole. I think many people on the call probably share this question. If we could just go back to, you said back in, I think it was 2016 or thereabouts, you pivoted from something that many companies want to do, pivoting from annual traditional performance reviews to more of a feedback, more frequent feedback for performance, what we call maybe a feedback culture. I noted in the chat, we did a major study on performance feedback culture several years ago, which is still very relevant today because like a lot of what we're talking about, a lot of companies are still aspiring to get to where you're at on these things. Can you share a little bit about that pivot from the traditional annual performance review, doing away with that, to a more frequent feedback culture?
Sure. I might have to dust off some of the cobwebs from that project. We actually called that internally, we called that reboot. We decided to reboot performance management, and her name, it's Tamara. She wrote a book called Performance Management is Killing Performance, something like that. And she was actually somebody that we were working with at the time, not necessarily on that particular thing. And so I will say the only way we were able to do this is I have just an amazing, innovative partner on the total reward side, Jessica Callahan, and she and I partnered together, kind of rolled up our sleeves and said, this process is hated by all. Managers don't want to do it. HR business partners don't want to do calibrations. It is just such a suck of time that we could be doing so many more engaging, amazing things. But how do we do this? And again, this did not happen overnight. So just let me be really clear about that. It, again, was a multi-year journey and getting people on board. Now, I will say, just to be really clear, the executives in our organization do still have individual performance modifiers. So it is not for everybody. But the majority of our employees who are on what we now call the company annual bonus. And so one of our core values is we win as a team. And so that really became our center stone for this. Now, we still do, and Jessica's team designed all of this, we still do an annual salary review process, but it isn't based on a number. It's not based on a performance rating. And so that, going back to those swift check-ins and that continuous feedback, I think really designed all of that. And again, I will say I think the secret sauce is she and her team came up with this concept that we call the Excellence Award. And an Excellence Award is a monetary amount that can be given anytime during the year. You do not have to, it does not come once a year. The company annual bonus is still once a year, but excellence awards can be given by and nominated by managers, by project managers, leads, teammates at any time to recognize exemplary performance that oftentimes goes above and beyond what your job or your role is. And I look back at that and I still remember, and I don't know if I think Jess might be on the call. I still remember being in the conference room when it like all finally came together one day. I think we might have started singing a Michael Bublé song out loud when we were like, I think we've got it. Now I will say one thing that was interesting that happened is we were really ready to go, and all of a sudden we got the news that Sumitomo was buying us. So we actually put a pin in this for about a year until the acquisition was completed. So I think I think it was like 2016 was maybe the first year where we rolled that out.
Darn those M&A activities that spring on you and you're not in the know maybe, or but good that the work you had done was seen as so valuable that you had to put a pin in it for a bit, but we're able to circle back to it. Wanted to just note the book that you mentioned, a couple of sleuths here on the call.
Oh,
thank you, Zeta and Colleen, found that it's Tamara Chandler's book, How Performance Management is Killing Performance, and what to do about it. So that's
she
over
has
in the
this great
chat.
she has this great analogy to a bicycle, and the frame of the bicycle, this really resonated with us. The frame of the bicycle is going to look different for different organizations. And so you have to figure out for your organization, what does that frame look like? There's not a, one ride fits all, but that was, I think, something that really helped us get unstuck about how to move forward with it. So yeah, that was a really great kind of blueprint to be able to move forward. So highly recommend.
And Jess popped in to let you know the song was Feeling Good, by the way.
Oh yeah.
And Colleen noted this in the chat too, but Jess is actually doing a flash call later today about pay transparency. So if you're interested in that,
there you go.
Flash call later today too. So Jen, I wanted to kind of zoom back out a little bit, almost going back to where we started, but I thought I would bring up our I4CP people productivity chain and using it here for the application around strategic priorities, because I think, when we talk, we're both kind of system thinkers and we kind of talk in this language anyway, but this model is really helpful to help you zoom out, zoom in, zoom back out. And so when we were talking, I thought about this and using this model as kind of a template, but how and when did you zoom back out from this project to make sure that there was alignment across the organization, starting with those key pillars all the way through your teams?
Yeah, Justin, that's a great question, because it's really easy to, in fact, today, as a matter of fact, so congratulations to the Symetra team. Today is actually the 1 year anniversary, the one birthday of our technology enabler platform. So it was really, we all just got super, down in the weeds in the implementation that, really kind of took place over about 18 months. And so it is really easy to get sucked in, and you have to remember to kind of zoom back out and come back. I call it kind of the like the 10,000 foot level to take a look at that. And one of the things that I know has been super important for Margaret, our CEO, is we are really lucky. She recognizes how critical the culture is. You're not going to, we can have the best strategy in the world. We can have super productive people, but if we don't have culture, if we don't have strong leadership, then it kind of doesn't matter. And so I think we've recognized, I don't know that at the time we recognized it, but I think our focus, going back to my sticky note, going back to that employer of choice and the culture pieces, I think really has translated then to these other, look at productivity in terms of profitability, customer satisfaction, and really being able to see the end result there by really focusing on the levers that we have. People leave Symetra but our turnover is I would say on the lower side compared to organizations, in our in our business. And the number one thing that we hear in our exit surveys that people will miss is the people. And it is one where we've just, I think, created a culture here and are continuing to, it's ever evolving. But it's starting to sort of seep out even into like our regulatory bodies. We've had insurance commissioners in states, in I think Iowa was the one that, when we introduced a new product and they're like, oh, that's right, you guys have that VTS, which is value, transparency, and sustainability. So I think a lot of that has for us, I feel like the circles might be slightly ordered differently, almost with culture in the center and then like a hub out to the others.
That's great. And yeah, you have to have the right culture. And then in turn, this program builds a stronger culture too. And so it's kind of cyclical that way. Now a lot of this is centered around the talent development, but you also lead talent acquisition. And so how has this work informed your TA strategy and how your TA team functions and approaches their work?
Yeah. So ironically enough, a lot of, because you're right. And actually, you know what, Tom, let's do this. I think that if you go to the next slide real quick, this just to bring back the illustration, with the future-proof workforce. Oh, actually, yep, perfect. Yep, that one. Oh. All these circles, I got to come up with some different shapes. You can see a lot of this doesn't necessarily touch on talent acquisition per se, because again, that was the focus. So what ended up happening was our technology enablement strategy around this. The RFP we did actually had nothing to do with TA, except that it was kind of my like secret little stealth plan to see what happened. So when we finished the RFP and it was and did all of that due diligence, and it was clear that the vendor that far and above was going to be selected, they just happened to have talent acquisition. And so we kind of put a pause and did another quick, like bringing everybody together and made the decision to go ahead and implement both. So we've got talent acquisition on the Eightfold platform, as well as what is called Career Hub, which is really, like talent management. And I'll tell you and I reference it in the video, I believe. The platform on the TA side uses artificial intelligence to help match by skills applicants to our roles. So it really helps recruiters shorten up their cycle time, because the platform, humans still make the decisions, but the platform does in a nanosecond what it takes a recruiter, at least a few minutes to do in scanning resumes, and really helps match up with the skills that are required for the role. And we're also working on training our hiring managers not to ask for a laundry list of, going back to the skills-based, and the book by Robin and John, is really think about like what are the key skills and what might be some of the adjacent skills, because that's really going to broaden your talent pool. So we implemented, literally TA went live a year ago today, and then we turned on the rest of the Career Hub I want to say in the fall time period.
And I know that coincidentally, some of the people that were impacted by this program and the skills-based approach were actually new recruiters that you hired, right?
It was. Well, we exactly. It was one of those, like, what's the thing, you have to, you're going to eat your own dog food, which I don't like that phrase, but it really captures it. So I forgot, Justin, that we had talked about that. That was something that was also happening in all this time frame. Was our talent acquisition team had a leadership change, and with that leadership change, we also we needed some more capacity there, because we were growing and just requisitions coming in. And so it was one where I said, okay, I really, really want to fill these positions internally. Like, oh, I like the drink your own champagne. Thank you. That's Karen. That's a great drink. We made our own champagne. And I said, I really want to fill these positions internally. So let's talk about three things. And first was project management. Because if you think about recruiting, each requisition is really a project in and of itself. And so as a recruiter, at least at Symetra, the way we do it, recruiters, have anywhere from 15 to 20, or at the time it was closer to probably 30 requisitions. So they need to be able to kind of keep the plate spinning on each of the requisitions, which is really like being able to move things forward, communicate back to hiring managers, communicate to candidates. So that became the second skill that we looked for, was communication. Do you have the ability to communicate regularly, effectively, keeping people looped in? And the third thing then was, it's closing the deal. It's being able to sell a candidate on not only Symetra, but the role and kind of a little bit of that matchmaking. So we were able to fill, I think we hired 4 people internally. One person decided not to join in the end for various reasons, but we were able to hire 3 of our positions internally as recruiters, because I'm like, we can teach them how to use an ATS. Well, I can't teach them, but I've got great people who can. And so it's been a really great way and kind of a success story to be able to point to for hiring managers to say it works, and it works really well internally. I'll use one of the recruiters as an example, Marilee. Marilee worked on our new business retirement area for I think 14 years. Now Marilee recruits for sales positions across our divisions, and she can speak so authentically to what a strong partnership that our business has with our sales areas. So it's been a real success.
Yeah, I love that story too, because it really highlights a couple other key findings from the accelerating workforce readiness. Is that you want to make sure you're capturing a wide array of the skills of your employees, but also be creative. Consider a lot of things as you're bringing that in, and then you can identify opportunities like that. So that's a great success story. So one of the other things I love about this whole initiative and program you put in place is that your future of work is kind of future-proofed too, in the way that you've built this. And that's because it's agile and you can adapt. And so I'd love to hear just a little bit about kind of your assessment now, 1 year in, of the current state, and what are the next steps you're considering as you head into 2025?
That's a great question, John. I think, Tom, if you go to the next slide, I think there's maybe just click twice and then we'll hold on the third click. So one of the things, I mentioned earlier about this future skills playbook that my team developed, and again, it was done internally. It was a lot of brainstorming around coming up with these discovery questions. And what's been really interesting lately is it's starting to pick up some traction. It's been there. It's been available for leaders for I think close to at least a year, if not 18 months. What's interesting, and this kind of goes back to, I think, was Jose's kind of question, is sometimes it just takes time. It has to sort of sit and incubate in the system as people start to ask the question. And what's great is I've been able to go, oh, that is awesome. You are asking all the right questions. And here's a tool for you. It's like, I said to somebody the other day, it used to be where I felt like, oh, always apologetic. Oh, we don't have that. Oh, we're working on that. Or we thought about that. And lately it's been so amazing to be able to say, oh yeah, we have that. We have a tool for that. But if you click one more time, Tom, this is really something that, Justin, to answer your question, that I want to go back and connect on is, I recently, it's been there, but I4CP has so many amazing resources. And one of them is this guidebook around upskilling and reskilling. And I feel like that blueprint, very similar to what we built around the Future Skills Playbook, but I think now we get to go back and refresh and really say, when we even drafted the playbook, like Gen AI was not really on the scene yet. And so that in and of itself is a completely different scenario, perhaps, as we talk about what roles we have. As an example, you can imagine being an insurance carrier. We have a lot of underwriting roles, and it's, that's a very quick use case or easy use case in a lot of cases for Gen AI. That is not going to eliminate underwriter roles, but it is going to shift, and we'll need people who have really good critical thinking skills, people who can look at it and really understand, is that AI? Is that right? And who are looking at those sorts of things. So I think for us, this will be the next area of focus, is now really starting to hit the ground working with leaders to help them identify what they need for the future.
On
Guys?
that question around AI, if I can jump in, Michelle
Sure.
had posted a question a few minutes ago. How did you maintain, AI can help mitigate bias from humans, but it can also introduce bias. So her question was, how did you ensure that AI maintains non-discriminatory practices when recommending employees for promotional roles, or just AI more generally? What did you do internally? I know Eightfold AI probably has their own aspects and practices there too.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it is an ongoing consideration. So yes, Eightfold has its own ethics around, and they're I just went to their conference back, and I think it was like the May timeframe. That was a lot of the conversation was about ethical use of AI, specifically, in their product. And one of the things that I think has the features that is really helpful, hiring managers, the individual candidate data, a lot of the identifying characteristics are masked in when they're looking at the applications. So like they would only see from my initials, they would see my initials JS. It would the algorithm is able to then pull out or I forget what the word is, but really mask any of that identifying data. So what it does is hiring managers, if they in the past might have, I'm sure nobody ever did this, but if they look at a name and they see a name, they're like, oh, I can't pronounce that, so I'm not going to. It's like that goes away. You see JS. And so what we've seen is that based on then the match score, which is based on the skills and it's looking at that. And again, it's not making any decisions, but it is serving it up in a way that we're seeing broader talent pools being fed over to hiring managers than ever before. But it's something we audit and look at the match score of those that we hired and go back to compare that. But it is a evolving, and you really have to have that trusted partnership with your vendor. That's a great question.
I think it's really really incredible the what you've done and the success you've had with it, but then also the humility to go back and look at it again, and how can we continue to refine, and being thoughtful and taking your time and building it with the personas and the way you've integrated in your whole organization, got leadership buy-in, are all things that are going to help it have staying power. And then you can also be agile and you can adapt to different parts based on different needs of the organization as it goes. So Zeta put in the chat, there's a link to the Next Practices Award write-up that Jen did, if you'd like some more information on that. But I just really want to thank you for sharing this amazing journey and all of these ideas with everybody here, and for your time today, Jen.
Oh, absolutely. No, this has been great. And I just want to say thank you to I4CP. I think we've only been members now for about 18 months. And that has been a huge turning. I just know that our team at Symetra has just so loved all of the information and the data, and just really opening it up. That has been incredibly helpful, especially as I've been working to evangelize all of this across the organization. So thanks, Tom. Keep doing what you do best with that research. Keep it coming.
Yeah, will do. We've got just a couple minutes left. I want to thank you as well, but I'd like to, if you're willing, one last question. One of the folks in the chat, from Tanya, she was asking, I think it was specific to the pivot from, because everyone's interested in at least considering this, again, the pivot from traditional performance management to sort of more regular feedback. What was the impact of that on engagement, retention, other key metrics? But also just more recently, everything you've been describing today, the talent marketplace, the career hub, all of this, what impact have you seen there, or is it too early to tell?
It's an excellent question, because we did the pivot away from performance management now I feel like was so long ago, pre-pandemic and all of that. But I think one of the biggest kind of ahas is we haven't had any leaders go, I really miss writing performance reviews. Could we do that again? And it's more of helping new leaders who come in and they're like, I don't have to write 17 performance reviews. And the answer is like, well, you don't, but our culture is about real-time feedback. It is about, keeping it light, not saving it all up. So it's kind of hard because that was a while ago, and that's just become our culture now. But I do think it's contributed greatly. Now we still manage performance, right? That didn't go out the window.
In fact, for some folks,
time.
it could be more work. And I mean, it's just more ongoing. It's just part of the new ocean you swim in, is this performance feedback culture. I liked what you said though. Oh, you mean we don't get to do reviews? I mean, that almost sounds like an SNL skit in the making or something.
Yeah, that. Not heard that from anyone here. And I just think about too, we quantified, I don't remember now what the number was because we had fewer managers back then, but it's like when you actually quantified how much time and the ROI was not there. But again, I give credit to our compensation team who was able to come up with a way to manage that, where we had always relied on the performance indicator to drive that. And so you take that out of the equation and it really does open up a whole new world.
Well, like Justin said, I also want to thank you. Great sharing today. You've had a lot of great kudos and interactions with folks in the chat, so really appreciate it. So thank you, Jennifer. Great job today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And as always, just want to close with a quick reminder that all of these Next Practice Weekly sessions are available for recertification credit hours from both HRCI and SHRM. So if you have a certification from either of those, I know it can be difficult to get your recert credit hours, so just jot down the relevant program ID or activity ID that's here on the screen or that Zeta has put in the chat, and you'll be all set on that front. We've got excellent guests coming up, like Jennifer was today, for the next several weeks, so look forward to seeing everyone back every Thursday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. Once again, thank you, Justin. Outstanding job facilitating today, and thank you so much, Jennifer. Great conversation.
Thank you.